Getting started here, and I'm just sharing the purpose for these workshops. They're intended to support wellness during COVID-19. They're culturally rooted. We're going to start each workshop with a cultural history video from the Arctic. As we expand, as we go forward, we may include cultural history videos from other parts of the world. Because that's my expertise. That's where we're starting. And they're really just intended for a space for people to explore history in a reflective way, a space for people to identify personal inspirations so that you can use them later in your work, in your writing, creatively or scientifically, because inspirations encourage a lot of what we do. And it's also a space to really write about and to talk about, if you want, some of the more challenging aspects of this lockdown and this crisis, but using those discussions to look forward, using those discussions to think about how we might innovate from here, how we might evolve. So with that being said, I'm going to share my screen here, and I'm going to share the second video in our cultural history series, which is early Inuit innovation. So it is the earliest stories. Well, we don't have dates on these stories, so it's hard to tell, but it's generally understood as ancient Inuit history. And it's our first accounts of innovating after a major crisis. So.
A day came, which the ancient Inuit people never expected. The sun came close to the full moon. Soon, the sun went behind the moon. It happened around noontime. The sun eclipsed behind the moon, and it was getting dark. But people could see, because it was not real dark. There was a kind of reddened color everywhere, and it got cold. It began to frost on the ground. The animals began to roam around. The birds began to fly everywhere. It seemed they forgot to be afraid of each other. The people had no clothes to wear, and they began to look for shelter. Some found caves. So were the animals looking for shelter. The birds were flying in every direction. The people could not hear much from each other because the birds and animals made so much noise. The sun and moon stayed together for 3 days and 3 nights. Each day, less and less noise could be heard. On the 3rd day, there were only a few little noises. On the 4th day, at noon, the sun came out from behind the moon, but it was still cold. There were only a few people who survived to see what happened when the sun came out to shine on the world once more. Every plant, all the grass, and the fruits and berries were frozen. Only a few large animals still walked around. When it looked like the climate would get even harder to live in, and that other disasters might come, the people began to think about how they might need better tools and weapons. They talked it over with each other and with the leaders. They thought about how to use rocks and stones, things like jade and slate, and hard rocks that would break off with sharp edges when they were hit the right way. They thought how to use driftwood and growing live wood, and bark and the soap and roots of the trees and plants. They thought about all the parts of the animals they could not eat and how they could be used. They experimented and soon made useful things: clothes, tools, bags, and pouches to store things, from skins, bones, teeth, sinew, guts, and even the blood of animals. One man thought about making a spear. He found a long piece of wood like a water willow. Then he found a pointed piece of rock. He fastened the rock to the end of the wood with a strip of animal skin. He tried it, and it worked. Some man took another kind of rock and put it on a short piece of wood to make a handle. He bound it together with rawhide and made a hammer. They made knives of all kinds out of sharp rocks. Sometimes they put wood or horn handles on them. They kept improving the first things they made until they had tools to do all the things they wanted to do. The women made clothes out of fur skin. No longer were the bodies of people uncovered and exposed to the sun and rain. The weather was changing little by little every coming year. One day, a man saw lots of fishes in the river. He was wondering if there was a way to catch more fish without fishing with a spear. This would be a better way. One day, he ran across a spider web and found that some flies had been caught. He began to see that if he could only make something like that web out of something, he would catch many fish with it. So he thought it over. All at once he took a piece of rawhide string and studied it, and the web of the spider. He tied a knot in the end of 2 strings and then another knot a little farther along between the 2 strings. He was making a mesh. He worked at tying the strings of rawhide together until he made a net like a spider web. He worked at it a long time. Then he set it in the river. The next morning, he looked in the net. Sure enough, he had caught 2 fish in it. The fish were hanging to the net. When he took the fish, the net twisted so bad, he thought about how to keep the net straight. He found 2 long roots of a tree. He pulled them through the top and bottom lines of the net. Then he tied one end of the net to the ground on the bank of the river. Only the bottom of the net was not tied down. He thought a rock might keep it down, so he put rock weights on the bottom of the net. Then he went home. Next morning, when he looked in the net, there were lots of fish in it. He brought the others and let them look. Since that happened, the Inuit have made the nets better and better. So the Inuit people built more and more things. One man looked into a mouse hole in the ground. The mouse had made a home in the high, dry ground. He had nice dry grass stored in the hole to sleep in and to keep him warm in the nights. That mouse had found roots and seeds to eat and had stored them in his home. The man told the others about the mouse building his dry home in the ground, keeping warm, and how he gathered and stored food away for the cold time. The people began to build their homes to keep warm in the nights while they slept and to keep dry from the rain. Their houses were half in the ground and the upper part was covered with earth. Those houses were really warm. Some other Inuit learned to build homes from the ants. One day, in wintertime, a man cut a hole in the ice on the river to fill a wooden bucket for water. He looked through the hole into the bottom of the river. He saw lots of fishes going up the river. He came back to the house and told the others what he saw. Then they talked about the fish and how they were going to catch them. Finally, one of the children went to look into the water. Sure enough, there were lots of fish. So he went and cut a young water willow. He sharpened one end and began to spear those fishes right through the hole in the ice. He came up to the house with 2 fish. He laid them on top of the house. The people came out to see them. Those fish were stiff frozen. They had not seen this before in their lives. They let them lay there. Pretty soon, the boy was getting hungry. He took up one of those fish and tasted it. It sure tasted good, and he ate it all. He told the others. They first found out frozen fish are good to eat from that boy. Many people made spears for fishing through the ice. Lots of men, women, and children have speared fish through the ice since then.
Wir erläutert, we write. One of the reasons why I like to write and record my thoughts and reflections and initial responses to things is because that's often where I find my own personal inspiration as an artist. And just the act of writing, one of the many ways we'll talk about today that writing can help. So today our first exercise is going to be a free write for about 2 minutes. I'm going to have you free write your reflections, inspirations, and responses to what you just saw. I don't worry about the time. I will keep track of it here on my phone. I'm also going to try to give you some nice writing music, so you know when we're writing, and when that music quiets down is when we're going to be done writing. For about 2 minutes, go ahead, starting right now, go ahead and write your responses, reflections, and inspirations to what you just saw. About 30 seconds. All right, about 10 seconds. All right, and we're back. So free writes can be helpful, not just for responses, reflections, and inspirations, but if you're having a challenging time with anxiety or with fear or even with anger, you can use free writes just to get your thoughts out on paper. You can rip it up when you're done, you can burn it, or you can store it for later. But there are some ways you can use free writes. So moving on, let's talk just a little bit about post-traumatic growth, which is one of the themes of the workshop today, how we can innovate and evolve after a traumatic event, like an earthquake or a war or an epidemic like we're in right now. So post-traumatic growth is positive change experienced as a result of the struggle with a major life crisis or traumatic event. So after World War II, here, we had some big innovation happen. This is the first radar system, which was a pretty big development for our research and technology communities. This is actually the first computer that was developed after World War II, and it was developed because there was a lot of coding that needed to be developed for that war. And then lastly, penicillin was also an innovation that happened over World War II. So how do we get there? How do we get to these positive experiences? I'll give you a few minutes just to read this text here from The Power of Meaning, which is by Dr. Emily Estefani Smith. So I'll give you just a minute here. I'll give you the music again. All right, is everyone good to go? I will take that as a yes. So, expressive writing can help. This is also some research from a social psychologist, and this is the last bit of research we'll read, and then we'll dive into the writing. But just wanted to give a forward here on what we're talking about and how expressive writing fits into it. So, what they're talking about here, instead of having you read it, I'll just kind of gloss over it. Is constructing a narrative really helps us understand what happened to us. And when it comes to trauma, it really helps us organize ideas. Until we do that, as you see in this third sentence here, the brain replays the same non-constructive thought patterns over and over. So writing really gives you a format and a space for you to put everything on paper and then to try to make sense of it. All right, so let's dive into our first writing prompt, and we will create a poem in response to that prompt. But first, I want you to just do another free write in response to this idea of innovation. So people are innovative. All peoples are innovative. Crisis can prompt us to innovate in ways we might not have thought to do so otherwise. So in what ways, I'll give you 2 minutes. In what ways and this is just a free write, any thoughts, they don't have to be complete sentences, be fragments, doesn't have to be spelled correctly, nothing like that. It's just getting your thoughts out of your head and on paper. In what ways have you had to innovate in response to how your life has changed since COVID-19? 2 minutes. Right, about 1 minute left. Right, about 15 seconds. All right, there we go. And we are back. So we have our free write, and we have phrases, we have sentences, we have ideas, we have thoughts on paper in response to this prompt. I'd like you to just take a few moments to go through your free write and underline, circle, highlight, just identify words and phrases that really resonate with you. Words and phrases you like, that mean a lot to you. Whether you like how they sound, you like what they mean, just things that resonate with you right now. All right, just a few more seconds on that. And then we're going to use your highlights, your circles, your underlines to create your first poem today. Well, maybe you wrote a poem earlier today. I don't know, but your first poem for this workshop. Oh, looks like we have a new participant. Oh, go ahead. Oh, how do I get her in? There we go. Oh, darn it. We are going to work on our first poem. So let's talk a little bit about poetry. I think most people on this call are familiar, but I really like this way of talking about poetry from this National Endowment of the Arts article. Like other forms of literature, poetry may seek to tell a story, enact a drama, convey ideas, offer vivid, unique description, or express our inward spiritual, emotional, or psychological states. Yet poetry pays particularly close attention to words themselves, their sounds, textures, patterns, and meanings. It takes a special pleasure in focusing on the verbal music inherent in any language. With that in mind, and you can refer back to this paragraph as much as you'd like, I'd like you to look at creating some verbal music using some of the inspirations and responses that you had, that you just wrote down. And so let's see here. Oop, there we go. So let me get back to this one. There we go. So your prompt for the next, your prompt is to write a poem from your first rewrite in 3 stanzas of 4 lines each. So I'm not restricting you in this poem for, you don't have a certain number of syllables. You don't have to make it short. You don't have to make it long. You are restricted on the structure for the stanzas, just to give you a little bit of structure. So you know what? Why don't I give you actually 4 minutes to complete writing a poem, or 5 minutes to complete writing a poem in 3 stanzas of 4 lines each. You can change that up if you'd like. It can be 3 stanzas of 2 lines each. I would like it to be 3 stanzas, and that's specific for a beginning, middle, and end in case those of you who want to do stories. So 3 stanzas, and we'll go ahead and give that 5 minutes, and I'll start the clock now. We've got about a minute left. All right, about 15 seconds, guys. 10 for this poem. Okay, let's come back. We often write first what we need to hear, because it's self-selecting. We focus on the things that matter to us, right? We focus on the things that we need to discuss, we need to talk about, right? And so, I saw personality and I saw individuality, but also like similar understandings. I mean, similar ways of reaching, which I think we're all doing right now in a lot of ways, reaching for different things, but similarly reaching. So, Clay enough, Buck, for sharing your thoughts and your work. Let's go on to the second prompt here, which is on biomimicry. So biomimicry, thanks to a discussion I had with Margie actually last week when I was talking with her about the movie, she said, that's biomimicry. And I thought, wow, that would be such an interesting thing to bring up in a creative writing workshop. So what is biomimicry? A good definition that I found was the design and production of materials, structures, and systems that are modeled on biological entities and processes. And the reason why I chose this definition is because of the writing. And during the conversation that Margie and I had last week, we talked about how biomimicry is often used in technical, the world of technology and innovation, of equipment and develop. It's not necessarily where we're used in a cultural or creative or holistic sense. Yet, as we learn today, humans, and we knew already, humans have been using biomimicry to innovate and to create and to evolve forever. So thought we'd bring that back into the sphere. And so our prompt regarding biomimicry and the natural world today is, what have you learned, been inspired by, and or observed in the natural world since COVID-19? So I'm going to go ahead and give you guys 2 minutes on this, starting now. About a minute left. About 10 seconds. All right, let's come on back. So I'm excited. So I had a lot of fun with this second one because what we're going to do with our reflections on the natural world is haikus, which make a lot of sense because they're Japanese. It's a Japanese style of poetry often written about nature. So a little cross-cultural writing here that we all probably have been exposed. I think we all have been exposed to haikus. So just to refresh your memory, there are 3 lines, 5 syllables in the first line, 7 syllables in the second, and 5 syllables in the third. You can feel free to use the same technique that we used before. You can go through your free write. You can underline, highlight, identify phrases or sections, or you can write new lines for this poem based on your reflections that you just wrote here. I'm going to give you guys 5 minutes for this haiku, and we are going to go ahead and start that now. Okay, about a minute left. about 15 seconds. All right, let's come on back. Let's come on back to the workshop here. Let's go on to the last one. Anybody that wants to jump off, feel free. Personal resiliency, our last prompt today, and the poem that we're going to create is response to personal resiliency. So the Bright Shores Creative Decolonization resiliency definition is the act of maintaining wellness over time. So let's move forward. What can you personally build upon to prepare yourself for your new normal? So I'll give you guys just a couple minutes. This is a tricky question in some ways. I encourage you to, really broaden your perspective on what you build and what you can build and what it means to prepare. Those are some of the things that were put into this prompt, was preparation and building, and what that means to you and what that looks like for you. Because we all build and prepare for different motives, right? For different fears, for different joys. So let's go ahead and just give a couple minutes on that, 2 minutes on that, and we'll start it right now. About a minute left. Okay, about 10 seconds. All right, let's come on back. So, all right, so for this one, I didn't create a slide because there's no restrictions on the poem that I'd like you to work on for this one. Now that you know a little bit about poetry and you've been know a little bit about format, I'm just going to actually give you just about 3 minutes, a short amount of time to respond creatively to what you can build upon. You can choose to make it as long or as short as you'd like. You can focus on one theme, on 3 themes. You can tell a story. You can share a memory or an experience. But I'd like you to work on a short poem for 3 minutes on sharing those thoughts. So we'll go ahead and give that a go, starting now. About a minute left. About 15 seconds. All right, let's come back. Okay, so that was our last prompt and our last creative writing exercise for the creative writing workshop. These, as I mentioned before, are just little kind of creative writing snippets. It's really intended, this workshop is intended just to get people out of their, whatever their lives might look like right now. If it's professional Zooming all day, if it's watching kids, if it's whatever, it's just intended just to get people to get out of their regular day for just an hour or so to explore some cultural history and to do some writing. So I hope you keep track of these inspirations and these creative seeds that you've developed. The next workshop is going to be next Thursday. The video that we saw this week was really full of lots of stuff, right? And so next week we will continue writing using the same video source. We might actually go back to the first video a little bit too, because that workshop didn't work out as well as I'd like it to have. So we have a lot of material to work with. Next week, I really think we might focus on writing a story. So not only are these cultural history workshops, but there are also opportunities to expose people to different creative writing styles. So we did a little bit of poetry today. We'll do some short story writing next week, and we'll see what happens after that.